Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Tashina from Logical Harmony. I just sat down to edit this video and realized I forgot to film an intro, so here I am. Thankfully it's still the same day. So this video is part of the Monsters and Makeup series that I've been doing where I do my makeup and talk about a cryptid because I love cryptids, I love makeup. If you're not familiar with what cryptids are, they are like things like Sasquatch, Mothman, Jersey Devil, things that are mythical. They might exist. Who knows? But just any like creepy, crawly creature that we've heard so many things about. And in this one, I'm actually doing like a dive into a lesser known one, Colossal Claude. Now, Colossal Claude is from Oregon, just like me. So that was why I wanted to do it. And I thought it would be fun. And I'm going to be doing this makeup, thankfully the same day, and talking about Colossal Claude. So I hope you enjoy. Okay, so today we're going to talk about Colossal Claude. Now, this is like one of my favorite river monster cryptid things, and not because there's like a ton to it, but it's just a very Oregon thing, and I just really like the idea of it. It's something that I think is completely plausible now, like river monsters, like, you know, the show with Rian, don't kill me, I'm forgetting his name, but the show with him, I feel like does a great job of like showing how things that a lot of people think are monsters are just giant fish. And he's actually been to the Columbia River and done some stuff there. I think the whole story behind Colossal Claude is super duper interesting and just very like, I don't know, something about it just like grabs my attention, grabs me in whatever way. So Colossal Claude is also known as the Columbia Bar Sea Serpent. He's also known as the Columbia Bar Sea Serpent, and in later years becomes known as Marvin the Monster as well. Though, okay, we'll talk about this a little later on. I don't know if that's Colossal Claude. I like Colossal Claude best as a name. If he's going to be anything, he should be Colossal Claude. So any products I use real quick will be listed down below. I'm not really going to talk about it while I'm using them because I would like to focus on what I'm actually talking about versus sharing the products that I am using. Colossal Claude was first spotted in 1934, now in March of 1934 to be specific, and it was by two ships that were switching crews at a light ship where the Columbia River meets the Pacific Ocean. So the Columbia River borders, like, it goes the border of Oregon and Washington for the most part, especially at that point. So just to give you a little geographical idea of where we are there. We're there. This is awkward already. That's okay. And so basically what they used to do, because this was such a traveled area, is they didn't have a lighthouse, but they had a light ship. So it's a ship that serves as a lighthouse. The one that was there went on to be in a museum in Seattle. The crews were switching, and so there were two boatfuls of people, and they both saw what they described as a like sea serpent type creature in the water. So many people saw him. So they said it was about 40 feet long total. His neck was about 8 feet long, and then it had like a big round snake-like body. So direct quote, it was described as having a mean-looking tail and an evil, snaky look to its head. Now, a different person who saw Colossal Claude on the other boat also provided a very similar description, only they described his head being camel-like instead of snake-like, but they described the body the same. They estimated the length of it was about the same, also described it as being round like a snake, with the long tail, and about 8 feet of it was up above the water. So the neck and the head were up above the water, about the same amount of length. And that's just super interesting because that was two different reports. And even though the ships were both there at the same time, they didn't talk to each other about it before they like reported what they were seeing. So they each reported very similar things. Both said that it like hung out for a few minutes between the boats, kind of like swam around, and then just took off and disappeared. And now people on one of the boats were going to approach it, and they were going to go out on like a small boat in the water, and this is where the ocean meets the river, so it's not like, you know, it's not the calmest water in the world. Juniper, what are you doing? But they were concerned because they didn't know what this thing was. It seemed to be really big, and they ultimately decided it's best to just like let it do its thing, give it its space. We don't want to like, you know, get in its way, cause any harm. And they changed their mind. So no one saw it up close, but both boats reported seeing it from the same distance and reported the same thing. And that was the first report of Colossal Claude, and that's what he became known as from that time forward, was Colossal Claude. And what's interesting is that this event actually got very, very little press. And it was the crew members that called him Colossal Claude. It wasn't like the press that came up with it, because that's frequently the case when you have things like Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. It tends to be like the press that comes up with them, but not in this case. It was a crew member that decided to call him Colossal Claude. And I think that is like the cutest thing in the world, that they were like, you know what, that thing we saw, Claude, that's his name, Claude. So he wasn't seen again for a little bit, and about 3 months later, there was a body that washed up, an animal body, I should specify, on the shore of the Long Beach Peninsula. That's just like a little bit north of where he was initially seen. So you have like the mouth of the Columbia River is here, and the Long Beach Peninsula is just north of it. So very much in that same region. And they didn't really know what it was at first, and they were speculation that it was Colossal Claude, but ultimately they decided that it was probably an identifiable animal. And how this was decided is, aside from the initial speculation that maybe it was Claude, there was nothing in the press afterwards. So that has led people to believe, people who study Claude and other cryptids, to believe that it must have been something identifiable, like a whale of some sort, and probably just in a state of decomposition where it was a little bit unrecognizable and a little bit harder to tell what it was. Contour my chin, my chinny chin chin. So the next reported sighting was in 1937, and there was a fishing trawler that reported seeing Claude. So this was 4 years later. So there was nothing in between those two sightings, which is super interesting, because it seems like for a lot of sightings, they do come in like blips. And it seems like for cryptids, that tends to be the case. You get a lot of them. But with Claude, there's never been a lot. And that's part of what's so interesting about it to me. So they described it as a long, hairy, tan-colored creature. So they also said it was about 40 feet long. They described the head as an overgrown horse, which is super similar to the camel comparison that someone else had earlier. They also said that its body was circular like a snake and probably about 4 feet in diameter. So a super, super similar description to what the previous sightings had given. And this was really fascinating because it was seen in that same area, so by the mouth of the Columbia River. They didn't have any interaction with it. It was kind of the same thing as with the other boats that saw him, where they were like, we don't know what this is. It's big. We don't know. So we're just going to like leave it and let it be. And I think that's like the best approach to have. Like, that's definitely what I would want to do if I saw something like that out in the water. I'd be like, heck no. Heck no. So the next reported sighting of Claude was about 120 miles south. So it was down in like the Newport Yachats area. And it is interesting to note, just as someone from Oregon, that you do have the Newport Bay there, and that is where the Willamette comes into the Pacific Ocean. And where that's interesting is because where Claude had been seen before was near, it was at the mouth of the Columbia where it meets the Pacific. So very, very similar like situations, very, very similar like as far as what animals are going to be there, things like that. And Claude had specifically been seen at the mouth of Columbia during spawning season. So the Columbia River is like, especially back in the 30s, especially with the Columbia River, you have so many fish that are swimming up the mouth of the river and into it. So a lot of animals kind of like camp out there. Like growing up, there would always be like sea lions there during the spawning season, because that's where they can get a bunch of food. So it makes sense that an animal like Claude would be there. And then to have him reported in the Newport Yachats area, where it's also similar. I don't know if it was the same time of year. This account, I could not find a month attached to it, but that's super fascinating to me. By the way, real quick, the coffee I'm drinking is a pumpkin blend. It's super good, and I have a giveaway going with them on Instagram, so I will link to that down below if you're curious. Just while you're here, you may as well get yourself some good coffee. You can also use the discount code Logical Harmony, and you get a discount. That's why it's a discount code, because you get a discount. And that's specifically off the pumpkin one. So the couple that sighted him at Devil's Turn, which is a really, really interesting feature anyway, like geographically and as far as the ocean goes, it's so cool. It's so cool to see in person. If you ever go to the Oregon coast, see it. I cannot accurately describe it other than it is like one of those like punch bowl type situations. It's not the Devil's Punch Bowl, that's north of Newport, but where you have like the cliffs and everything that come down and the water just rushes into it in such a cool way, where it really shows you how powerfully aggressive the ocean is. And it is interesting that he was seen there. Now, I have seen myself like a bunch of whales near Devil's Punch Bowl, so maybe it's something about the calm areas around them. I don't know. But Claude was hanging out there and this couple spotted him. Now, it was only the couple that spotted him this time. It was not like groups of people like it was before. It was just the two of them. They described it as what looked like an aquatic snake, that its neck and head were up above the water. Now, they said they thought it was about 15 feet. And honestly, from a distance, I don't know that there's that much of a difference between like 8 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet. Either way, you're really describing the same sort of thing. And they described it as being about 55 feet long. So definitely a little bit longer too than the others had described. But at this point, it's been a few years. Maybe Claude's had a growth spurt. Who knows? It could also be that, they're not accustomed. Like, if I saw something from a distance, I would have no idea how to guess how long it was or anything like that, or height. But I feel like if you are fishing and you're out on those boats and you see things in the water all the time, you're probably a little more aware of how to guesstimate some things like height or length or anything like that from a distance. So again, I don't know that there's that much of a difference between like 40 feet and 55 feet in the big picture. I don't think it really matters, but it's super interesting to me that they reported seeing it so much farther south. And that's the only report of Colossal Claude that does not exist at the mouth of the Columbia River, which is also interesting because it brings up the speculation of, was that not Claude? Is there more than one? Could there be more than one? And then the last sighting of him was actually in April of 1939, and he was spotted in his usual hangout just off the mouth of the Columbia River, so up farther north again. And he was also spotted by a fishing boat again this time. So this was a whole crew on a boat that reported seeing him, and they said that he passed within about 10 feet of their boat, and that they described the head as snake-like, and again, that about 10 feet of it was up above the water, glassy eyes, a bent snout, and they also claimed that it came and took fish off of their line. So I don't know. I don't know if that's true. Interesting that it was in the same time of the year. So definitely that spawning season again, the same location as normal. And at this point, maybe Claude's getting a little lazy and he's like, why should I do my fishing myself when I can just, wait for these guys to do it for me? And that was like the last confirmed sighting of Colossal Claude. So I think another thing that's super interesting to me about this is it's all within such a small range of time. Like, so many cryptids, you hear about them and the sightings span a long time frame, whereas this is very much like this concentrated little space of time. And there aren't that many sightings. Like, this is only a handful. This is what, 4? So it's not like Claude is like the most social cryptid out there. He's not hanging out. He's not making himself known, except for during spawning season. Apparently that's the time where he's like, I need to go out, make some friends, say hi to some new people. And there's lots of reported sightings after that, like small sightings, but nothing concrete. They're all like one-off things. They were not really reported on. They were not collaborated on by like multiple people. So it wasn't like multiple people coming forward saying that they saw Claude, unlike before. It was just people here and there. But those all stuck to the same region of right around the mouth of the Columbia too, which is also interesting. And it could be, at that point, going back to Jeremy Wade, that's his name. So going back to Jeremy Wade and river monsters and how he has gone on the Columbia River and found fish that were, speculated to be monsters and aren't. It could also be that these fishermen were seeing something different. They weren't seeing Claude. It could be kind of what happens with like the case of Mothman, where it's people who are just kind of getting caught up in the hysteria of it and thinking they see something that maybe they don't. But there was never another group sighting of Colossal Claude and never another like interaction in the same way that had happened before. And I find that super duper interesting because we just don't know. We don't know if that was him or not. So there was one more reported group sighting of Claude. Now, I know it sounds like I'm misspeaking myself, but the reason I'm hesitant to include it with talking about Colossal Claude is because I don't think it was Colossal Claude. There's a few reasons why I don't think this was Colossal Claude. So one, it was in 1963, so a couple of decades later, and it was by a crew on a Shell Oil Company ship, and they were out in the Pacific near the mouth of the Columbia, so same location, and they were looking for potential oil out there. And they reported seeing a snake-like animal, and they actually got it on film. Now, I was not able to find like video of it, so I can't really confirm and say like, oh yeah, this matches the description. And that's also why I'm hesitant. But they said it was only about 15 feet long, so much smaller than any reports of Colossal Claude previously, and then it had barnacled ridges on its body. None of the other reports included barnacled ridges or unbarnacled ridges at that. They did say it swam in a corkscrew fashion. They decided to call it Marvin the Monster. Now, I think Marvin is the appropriate name because I don't think it was Claude. Personally, I'm not bought in. Now, when it does come to talking about Claude, I think it's totally possible that there is something out there, and I know I always say that, but it's because I really do think that. And there are a few different theories about what Claude could have been, and some of them are super, super fascinating to me. So obviously, you have your ideas, the more realistic ones, that maybe Claude was some type of whale that people saw or some type of big sturgeon. Some people speculate he might have been a jellyfish. Maybe they're just jellyfish in shapes and sizes that I have never heard of, but I don't know that I believe Claude was a jellyfish. I could see him being like a whale or a sturgeon. It doesn't explain the part about like the consistent report of about 10 to 15 feet of the body being up out of the water. It definitely doesn't explain that at all, but it does explain a lot of the other behavior. So there are also some other theories about what Claude was. I'm going to do my liner off camera, my liner and lashes, and then I'll be right back and we'll talk about those because I will not be able to do it while attempting to do things near my eyes with pencils. It's just a terrible idea. Okay, liner on, lashes on. Let's keep talking about Claude. So my favorite theory about him, which is I know the least plausible of them all, but it's the most fun, is that at some point in the Jurassic era, so like millions of years ago, like 60 million years ago, something like that. I don't know. The guy from Jurassic Park he would give you a better estimate than I would, maybe Newman would. Anyway, there is a thought that perhaps somehow, because there were amphibious reptiles that existed back then that do actually kind of fit the description of Claude, at least as far as how we've decided that they must look. So there is a theory that somehow a pod of these survived everything. Again, very outlandish, but I love this theory that somehow a pod of these survived and has existed and been out and about there in the ocean. Maybe they froze, maybe they didn't, maybe they've just been hanging out waiting for us. Doubtful. Is that they were out there and that Claude is part of that, and that the reason the sightings stopped with Claude is that he was the last of his kind. And I feel like that's like kind of a sad way to think about it, but honestly, I love it. I think that would be so interesting if that's really what it was. Now, I'm sure the real thing with Claude is something much more simple. Like he really was just like a whale or something that they misidentified. So like realistically, is Claude probably like a whale or some sort of big fish? Yes. But how much fun would it be if he was actually the last of this dinosaur essentially to exist? Like that would be so fascinating to me, so interesting. And that is the theory that Rogue Ales embraced, and they are a brewery. They started in Oregon. If you're from Oregon like I do, you know Rogue. You can get them other places now. I forgot lip liner, so I'm just going to do this. Just do it anyway. So Rogue has a beer called Colossal Claude, and it is an IPA. They have one other beer, and they call them Monsters of IPA, and it's Bat Squatch, which is also a super interesting little fun cryptid bite. If you are interested, let me know, because I am. They fully embrace the theory that Claude is was the last of his kind and was the last of this dinosaur. And they actually have a super fun animated short that tells a miniature story, like a 30-second version of Colossal Claude. They definitely made him like a little scarier than the reports, I think, are. They made him very snake-like. They made him have big teeth. But I just think it's such a fun story. I grew up kind of you hear about river monsters a lot. You hear about sea serpents, but Colossal Claude, being from Oregon, was just like very near and dear to my heart. So I wanted to share him with you. I would love to hear what you think about Colossal Claude. Do you think there's a chance he was a dinosaur that just like hung out, stayed hidden in the depths, and then came out during salmon season to eat? Like maybe the food he was actually eating in the ocean started to become overfished or something, and so he wasn't able to stay hidden anymore. Or do you think it's something much more, mainstream, like some sort of a large fish or a whale, which is, I know, the most likely. But how does it describe all the reports that there was like 10 to 15 feet of him out of the water? It doesn't make sense unless they were just imagining things. I mean, people thought manatees were mermaids, so I guess could be worse. I would love to hear what you think about it. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you next time.